Hey, welcome to my first Facebook Live. So I hope many of you will come and join me. Yeah, I've never done this before, so I'm pretty pleased with myself that I managed to figure it out so far, and hopefully there aren't going to be any technical hitches. Drop me a comment if you are watching this live, because if you don't drop me a comment, I won't know that you're here. So just hashtag live and I'll give you a little shout out. Or if you're watching it on replay, pop hashtag replay and then I can say hello to you in the comments. So this is the new live series. I am gonna run a live every single Wednesday at 7 p.m. And the whole idea of the lives is to cover some of the topics that maybe I haven't covered on the blog before, and just give a bit more of a well-rounded view of zero waste life. I feel like the blog is very much like, you know, my experiments and talking about the things that I love to do, my hobbies and interests, a bit of travel, all of that sort of stuff. But what I really want to get across on these lives is a bit more of like the whole picture. So I'm planning to cover lots of different topics about mindset, about money, budgeting, about family, friends, jobs, working from home, working in offices, and how you can adapt your habits to be more zero waste in those areas. But also just talking about the resilience that is needed in order to live zero waste lifestyles in a very non-zero waste world. So yeah, like I was saying, drop me a comment, stay to the end, and I am going to give out a freebie. So it's a zero waste roadmap, everything I basically wish that I had known before I started on my zero waste journey. And I'll also tell you a little bit about what I am launching next month. So I'm pretty sure you're all going to know who I am, but let's start with an introduction. So my name's Charlotte. I've been living zero waste for 2.5 years now, and I started going zero waste in January 2017 as part of a New Year's resolution. And the New Year's resolution was started at the same time as my friend Anna. So the two of us went zero waste. We thought it was going to be very easy. We were super optimistic. And then when we got started, we realized it wasn't actually as easy as we thought it would be. So we had to try and navigate lots of different things in our lifestyle, such as food shopping, such as wearing makeup, all of these different things that we hadn't really had to consider before going zero waste. We suddenly had to think about how to do these in more of a mindful zero waste way. So the thing that I'm going to be covering tonight is about producing waste. So I live a zero waste lifestyle and I blog about zero waste living, but even now I produce waste. And I think it's something that I feel passionately that I need to share, that I still produce waste, and I want to share with you why I feel so passionately that I should tell you guys that I do produce waste, and how it used to sort of affect me when I didn't feel like I could share those sorts of things, and how I now feel more confident now that I can share that with people. So like I said, please feel free to comment, and also please feel free to let me know if you want me to cover a particular topic on these lives. It makes it way more interesting if I know what you guys want me to chat about. So yeah, in the start of my zero waste journey, I was making lots of zero waste changes when zero waste wasn't really well known. It wasn't really a thing. Like, I say that like, you know, eco-friendly hasn't always been a topic to some people, and I know it has, and I know there have been many people who've come before me who've lived very, very sustainable lives, but zero waste as a term wasn't really a common term like it is now. And I think it's thanks to David Attenborough that it's come so much more in the limelight of, yeah, I live zero waste and this is why. But back at the start, when I began my journey, I was working in a full-time job, and people around me had never heard of the term and had no idea why I was doing what I was doing. And because I felt like I had to be the perfect example of someone living zero waste, I became very, very militant in my approach to zero waste living. So I would be really super strict about where I'd go, about what I'd do, to make sure that I wouldn't produce any waste at all. To the point where I'd be sort of really, really adapting my lifestyle and my schedule to make sure I'd avoid certain things. And that then meant that I was kind of changing the way that I was talking to people on the blog. So it was sort of like this weird kind of scale where I was actually doing a really great job of living the ideal zero waster, as in nothing was going into my bin, no plastic, nothing. Like I would not bring any plastic home from the shop, and I wouldn't be buying anything that could potentially have plastic on it. Zero waste. I was reusing everything. I was really very strict with myself. But then on the flip side, I felt like I wasn't able to share my mess ups if I ever had one. So I was in this weird kind of area where I was living a really good zero waste lifestyle, and then I almost felt like it was too good to be sharing with someone who wasn't at the same level that I was, that they would consider that I was showing off. So I was in this weird like catch-22 of actually living like an ideal zero waste lifestyle, but then being embarrassed that I was living it really, really well, but then not really being fully happy living zero waste because I was not doing all of those things that I really wanted to be doing. So like I said, I was adapting where I'd go, like what I'd take part in, because I was worried about producing this waste. And my journey kind of flatlined in terms of zero waste living. It was up until sort of maybe 6-9 months in, I was making like really steep progress, and I was learning loads of things, and I was getting really inspired, and I was really, really enjoying the journey, and I was trying lots of different things out and just having a great time. But then maybe sort of the 9 months mark, I flatlined. And this was when I'd started writing the blog. That also flatlined as well. And I just felt a little bit like, who was I to tell anyone how to live zero waste, when I still felt like I wasn't perfect, which is weird looking back and seeing it from these eyes now, and I'm like, no, I was doing a really great job. But I just felt like I couldn't tell anyone what to do because I wasn't living zero waste perfectly. And I'd look at other people who'd been living zero waste lifestyles for years and years, like 10 years, 20 years, and I'd be like, I'm nowhere near close to them, and I live in a city and I know that there's waste being produced around me. So who am I to tell anyone else what to do? So yeah, I was flatlining, but I was equally feeling like I stopped enjoying zero waste living the way that I did when I first found out about zero waste living. And I felt like the potential of a zero waste lifestyle, and it sparked creativity back in me, and I was able to problem solve around lots of different issues. That just sort of started to go. I felt like I was being really inauthentic when I was posting on social media, so I sort of started to shy away from that as well. And I felt shy telling people that I was zero waste and explaining the whole concept, because this was back at a time when zero waste living wasn't a thing. So every time I was saying, oh, I don't want a straw because of this and this and this, I was having to do a really big explanation of why I was doing what I was doing and what the effect was of that. And I love it now. Like, now it's my job, it's my absolute passion. But back then it always felt a little bit like, oh, I have to go through the motions of explaining things, and then people are always like, oh, what's the point? Or, oh, one person can't make a difference. And now I've got responses to all of those different things that get thrown at me. Like, now I know what to say, but back then I was always a bit like, oh, I'm being judged, and that really hurts. And it's hard, and it's something that you know, I just needed to practice and just needed to get better at it. But back then it felt really like, I guess, a personal insult, but then I also felt like, oh, I've just told everyone I'm zero waste, and now all eyes are on me, and I now can't make a mistake, because if I make a mistake, these other people aren't going to want to try zero waste living, because they're going to realise that it's a bit of a fraud lifestyle. Like, you say you're zero waste, you say you don't want single-use items, but actually it doesn't matter if you do. If no one's watching, do what you want. So I started to feel, embarrassed, essentially, embarrassed about what I was doing. I kept it very quiet, very private, because I was just so worried that someone would see me mess up and someone would see me throw things away when, and that's just mad to look back at it now and think that that's what I thought. I felt really alone at that time, because I felt like nobody else seemed to think this. And I know this was a really stupid way to look at it, but I felt like I could see all these influencers, I could see these people who were living their best zero waste lives, I could see, influencers, people who had written books, people who were stars in films, and they were rocking it. They were doing such a good job of living completely zero waste. And then, because zero waste wasn't really a thing back when I started, it felt like my work colleagues and my friends thought I was doing a nice thing, but they didn't really understand. And it felt like, for me, it was so important and such a massive thing that I really wanted to spread the word about, but I just felt like I didn't know where to go with it. I was in that kind of place where I was like, I don't feel like I'm an expert, but equally I know that I should be living zero waste, so I don't know where to go with this. And then I hit a bit of a turning point, luckily, where I stopped feeling this way so much. And I really remember this one particular point. So I had just gone back to my parents' house, so my parents live in Bristol. And I got on a train that was a little bit earlier than the train I was meant to get on. And I went up the stairs, and then my brother came home. So he was living at home at this time. So he came in, and he'd just been on a work shift, and he had in his hands a pizza, and he'd got the pizza from like a supermarket. So he opened the door, and I called down the stairs. I was like, "Hey, I'm home," and I could see him with this pizza, like, no, it's the zero waste girl. And he felt really embarrassed at the fact that he had this pizza box, because he was worried that I was going to judge him for producing that waste. And I could literally see him being like, oh, what do I do with this? What do I do with this? And I was like, you're embarrassed that you've got a pizza, aren't you? And he was like, yeah, a little bit. And it was in those moments, like that moment and other moments that have been similar, where other people have almost been embarrassed to waste things around me, that I've realised that I don't actually hold judgment when other people produce waste. One of my friends asked me right back at the start of my journey whether I hate it when I see somebody using a plastic straw. And I mean, I don't love it. It's not like the nicest thing for me to see, but I don't really, like, I don't judge the person. Like, you know, I know it's not great, but equally I'm not there thinking that person is bad. And that's not the right way to look at sort of zero waste issues. So anyway, this pizza box scenario, I realised that I was treating other people with more kindness than I was treating myself. So to put the pizza box scenario into greater context, Tom had just been working a night shift, there was no food at home, so he went to the shops and he got the pizza. I'm sure there are more sustainable options that he could have chosen, but he chose the pizza, and that's fine. So why was I being so strict on myself when I was producing waste? And it was because I was working towards this ideal or this perfection. Striving towards that is great, but when it's at the detriment of happiness and when it means that you're missing out on things, what's the point? And can you be putting your energy into other things? And the answer is yes, you can. So sorry, I've got some notes and I have a habit to go off on a tangent, so I just want to make sure I'm covering everything. So yeah, I realised that I was treating other people with more grace than I was treating myself. So I decided that I was going to change the way that I was looking at the waste that I was producing. And one of the things that I went back to were the 5 R's, and you've probably heard me talk about them before. So it's the 5 R's that I use to reduce waste, and lots of other people follow these as well. So number 1 is to refuse waste, number 2 is reduce it, number 3 is reuse it, number 4 is recycle it, and number 5 is rot it, so composting the waste. And by going back to those, I could think, okay, so if I can't produce no waste, what can I be doing with the waste that I have got? And making sure that it doesn't end up in landfill. What other schemes are out there that I could be giving the waste to, whether it's donating it to craft projects, whether it's finding local recycle schemes that will oh, I think I went off then, sorry. So yeah, it was just about sort of having a bit more of an approach to zero waste living that was more forgiving. So this pizza box thing was like a massive thing in my head that I was like, okay, I need to change. But there were other things that kind of guided me on the journey towards changing the way that I was approaching zero waste and approaching the feeling of being really hard on myself if I ever did produce waste, or feeling like I never could produce waste, because then I'd be considered a failure in the eyes of people who were looking to the blog for inspiration. And one of them is another fellow blogger actually. He's written a couple of books as well, but his name is Mark, got that one wrong, Mark Manson. I read a lot of his stuff, so he writes a lot of like long form journalism. His areas of expertise are about personal development, relationships, life in general, like the meaning of life, finding your purpose, finding what makes you happy, what to do when you realise that you aren't happy, how to change things around you, basically. And one of his articles in particular was talking about the kind of self-depreciating habit that I realised I'd been getting into. And that was to think that I was the only person who had these feelings. And getting into the state of like, poor me, like I'm the only one who feels like this, nobody else feels like this. Like looking out at people and being like, they've got zero waste living sorted, like their lifestyle's perfect, and then being like, and then there's all these other people who aren't living zero waste. So where does that leave me? And then it was just leaving me to stagnate and not produce any content that was of any value to anyone. Not encouraging anyone to make any changes, because I just felt really embarrassed in the stage that I was at. And I think that the way that he presented the idea of that being really selfish to assume that you're the only one who thinks and feels that way was quite an eye-opener to me, to be like, okay, I'm not the only one who feels like this. Like, there are so many people on this planet that are trying to go zero waste as well, that don't know what zero waste is but have the best intentions and aren't purposely trying to hurt the planet. And if they knew what zero waste living was, they would make intentional choices to lower their waste. So that kind of sparked me to think, I need to be a bit more honest about these feelings, because other people have these feelings too. We don't live in a perfect world where we can be completely zero waste. And I think anyone who tells you that you can be is kind of hiding part of the truth, because we all have so many different hats, like we all are part of so many different things. So maybe we volunteer somewhere, or we work in a certain place, or we're a parent, or whatever it might be. We have these different zones of our lives, and by just being involved in these different areas, that means that waste is going to be produced. And even if we try and intentionally reduce our personal waste, waste gets created somehow, like upstream, or you know, it gets brought to us and we didn't intend for that waste to be produced. So I think it's actually really detrimental to say I am zero waste 100% of the time and I don't produce waste, because I know I do, and I know very much most people out there do, unless they live in a completely different area to me, completely different part of the world, and then maybe they don't produce the same level of waste that someone living in a city like I do could. Another person who sort of inspired a change in the way I was thinking is, her name's Anne-Marie, but on Facebook and Instagram you can follow her as the Zero Waste Chef. So she, it does what it says on the tin. She's a zero waste chef, but she put out a quote that has been shared loads and loads, and the quote is, we don't need a select few people doing zero waste perfectly, we need lots of people doing zero waste imperfectly. I think she said millions of people doing zero waste imperfectly. And that is literally the truth, isn't it? Because what was the point in me obsessing over the fact that, I had an empty bin? Fantastic. Like, what was the point in me just focusing on that and then not putting out any content that said about how I was thinking and feeling and how I was struggling? Because by doing that, I wasn't inspiring anybody else to make a change. And, by presenting zero waste in that way of, you can only be perfect to say that you are zero waste. Like, it's an all or nothing thing. And if you're not zero waste 100% of the time, like all the way through the year, don't even bother saying you're zero waste. Everybody's gonna go, that's not for me then, that lifestyle doesn't fit with me, like I can't produce that. And if that's the message that is being pushed out there of, if you're not 100% zero waste, don't even bother trying, we're not gonna make any progress, because people are just gonna say, well, that's too hard for me, I can't do that. So that quote I love, and it really resonates with me. I think it's just a perfect example of that. When we work together, we produce better everything, and we can support each other throughout the issues. So in terms of takeaways from this live, I just want to make everyone feel like their zero waste journey can be theirs. It doesn't need to replicate mine at all. It doesn't need to look like anybody else's. It can look exactly how it needs to look for you, for your lifestyle, for your budget, for what you have access to. Maybe you have a large family, a small family, maybe you have to use the car every day. That's fine. You can be reducing waste in other areas of your life. And you don't need to compare your lifestyle to other people's. If the changes that you have made have been huge to you, then that's fine. I'd also say surround yourself with really good inspiration. So that might be following certain Instagram accounts, that might be reading certain books, but equally, if you find that you're following someone who is making you feel like you're never going to reach perfection in terms of zero waste, unfollow them. And if that's my account, then that's fine. But just make sure that you are surrounding yourself with the right inspiration to push yourself forward. So I remember at the start of my zero waste journey, I lent my phone to my boyfriend and he was scrolling through my Facebook, and literally every single group that I seem to be part of, probably still now actually, was like zero waste life, zero waste in the UK, zero waste world. And he was like, oh my days. And it was by surrounding myself with that kind of thing that real behavior change started, because it was like I could just go and get inspiration instantly, and I could be having, like, people would be having discussions about things that I'd never thought about. So I could be like, oh, nice, when I need to do that, I can think back to that scenario and implement it. So yeah, I mentioned about getting support online, but also if you're wanting to progress your zero waste journey, I'd recommend getting support offline as well. So maybe that's in like the local community near you, maybe that's a community group, a litter picking group, maybe a meetup group, or you could start up your own zero waste meetup group. Or finding yourself an accountability buddy. So that could be anybody who is on the Facebook group, the Zero Waste Facebook group, or the Instagram group. You can just pop a message out there, or you can private message me and I'll pop a message out, and we can link people up to get an accountability buddy. Because honestly, it's way easier when you've got someone to share your struggles with and to ask those little things like, oh, can I recycle this? Or could I reuse this? What would you make this into? All of those sorts of questions that come up kind of on the regular when you're trying to lower your waste. And the final thing is just to like own your waste. If you produce waste, own it. So I got a delivery yesterday that was wrapped in bubble wrap, and I didn't expect that to be wrapped in bubble wrap. Like, it was annoying, but by that point, what could I do with it? So I spent the afternoon popping the bubble wrap, shredding it, so that I can take it to the supermarket and put it into the plastic bag recycling bin. Like, it wasn't an ideal situation, but think of ways that you can reduce and minimize the waste that you end up with, so that you're not just popping it in the landfill out of convenience. So those were the ways that I've kind of gained confidence through sharing when I create waste, and how when I sort of felt like I couldn't produce waste, I made myself less happy. And when I felt like I had to be perfect all of the time, it was actually really detrimental to the message that I was putting out there and the way that I was able to inspire other people. So as I said at the start of the live, I have put together a roadmap for people who want to go zero waste, and I will put a link to it in the comments. So all you need to do is follow the link and then it will get sent out to you. This series is going to be going on every single week, like I said. So if you do have a topic that you'd like me to cover, please let me know. It's also going to be leading into the launch of a zero waste course. So the zero waste course is completely online, and it can be done in your own leisure, but it's typically done over a 30-day period. And we put together like an accountability group. There are planners in there to help you think about your goals and your aims. There's ways to audit your waste, to have a look at the clothes in your wardrobe, and plan meals, all of those sorts of things that help you lower waste. And I'll be having like one-to-ones with you to see where you're at, see what you need support with. So that will be launching at the end of October, and I will be telling you more about it over the next kind of couple of weeks. But I'm going to put a link to the waiting list for the course in the comments of this as well. So there's a goodie up for grabs for anyone who wants it, the Zero Waste Roadmap, and then if you're interested in knowing more about the course, you can pop your name on there as well. So thank you for joining me on my first live. I was a little bit nervous, so thanks for sticking with me, and hopefully over the next few weeks I can kind of perfect the way I deliver it. Have a great evening, and I'm really thankful to you guys for joining me. Bye!